Welcome to Lockbox, a podcast providing real estate professionals with action items for success. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I'm going to be your host. I'm the founder of two real estate marketing and tech companies, STEEZY.Digital and realnurture.io. In this podcast, you'll learn from top 1% real estate and mortgage brokers the exact secrets to their success. Welcome to Lockbox.
Welcome to Lockbox. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I am here today with Zev Freidus. Zev, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So start it off. Tell our listeners who you are and where you're from.
Okay, my name is Zev Freidus. I am a broker from Boca-Raton, Florida. I run both residential and commercial real estate brokerage called ZFC Real Estate.
Love it. And before you got into your real estate career over the last 20 years, and we'll get into everything that ensued during that time, which is very interesting. What got you into real estate in the beginning? Like, what was your first exposure to real estate?
Right. So that's interesting because I got into it like most people, which is kind of by accident. I really don't think that you ever meet a child who says, when I grow up, I want to be a realtor, right? Pretty much everyone in this industry came from somewhere else. Some came just thinking of not just myself, but the agents who I've coached, the agents who have worked under me. Some of them have been lawyers, some have been hedge fund managers, and some have been uneducated and been, blue collar or just all walks of life. But nobody really sets out to be a realtor. It's just I don't know why. It's just the way it is. So for me, it was the same thing. Prior to getting into this business, I had a corporate job. I was a product marketing manager for a Fortune 100 company, and I was doing very well. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was traveling all over the world with a company credit card. And it was certainly a good experience. But, as life goes on and you have a young family at home, that kind of gets old and, you want to be home. But the company I worked for wanted me not only to keep doing that, but if I were to advance an organization, they expected me to relocate to wherever the next promotion was.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to do that. And I'm not knocking the company. It's, again, Fortune 100 company. It was a wonderful experience. But, they're always buying companies and they always need, I was a product marketing manager. So the next step would be a general manager. And that would mean, if they acquire a company in another state, that would be opportunity for me. But I didn't want to go to another state. I had left a career in New York to move to Florida in the 1990s because I wanted to live in Florida. So I was not open to relocating to wherever they bought something this year. Now, prior to getting to this crossroads, I had been investing in real estate just for myself. Just because I was smart enough to understand the value proposition of investing in real estate. And I can get into all of that. I think anyone in this industry understands why real estate is an appreciating asset. It's a hedge against inflation. And then when you add in leverage to it, if you can buy a piece of property with 20% down and the property increases 20%, you made 100%. So that's the magic of real estate. So I had moved to Florida. And one of the main reasons I moved to Florida in the 90s was because I was in my early 20s living in New York and renting an apartment and realized it's going to take a miracle for me to be able to own my own house, let alone investment properties. You just simply couldn't rent a house in New York you couldn't bring in enough rent money in New York to cover the mortgage, right? So I had family here. I was familiar with the area. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go to Florida because in Florida, this is 20 plus years ago, but in Florida, I can buy a house for, $150,000, $200,000 at the time,
right,
which you couldn't do in New York. So I came here and I did, and then I bought another one and another one. And then I had my day job and I was traveling and my real estate investing kind of took a backseat because I wasn't around too much. And then when I got to this crossroads where do I want to relocate or not, I said no. So I quit my job and didn't really know what I was going to do. But everyone else, I had my license. So I said, hey, if I can sell a house this month, then I can defer my job hunt for another month. And that's what I did. I sold my neighbor a house and I made basically a commission equal to 1 month's salary at my job. So I did that again and I did that again. And what I ran into is something that most realtors run into, which is, if you go to any of the big brokers, or if you go to any of the big real estate education books or courses or coaches or whatever, they tell you sphere of influence, print out business cards and hand it out to everybody, give it to the people in the grocery, give it to your mechanic, give it to everybody. Sphere of influence, friends, family. And of course, that's great. I mean, sure, sell them all a house. But the problem is you exhaust that. So all your friends and relatives are all settled into their new homes, and you still need to make a living. Mm-hmm. So I ran into that. So
I want to stop you there.
Yeah.
So you've transitioned now out of your W-2 job, and you're in Florida as a real estate professional, and you also have some investment properties at this point, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So then moving forward then, prior to me hitting record today, you talked about building a brokerage up to 250 agents and successfully exiting from that.
Yes.
Which is like the dream of so many top brokers out there that are my listeners, thinking, man, I've been doing this for like 15, 20 years. I'd really love to escape the day-to-day and maybe even sell my brokerage. Right. Like that's literally the point they're at in their career, and you've done it. And so I would love to dive into that journey.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll tell you, I had that same dream. It's a tough business. There's burnout and, the old joke in the business when you become the broker, right? And, everyone wants to cash out and not have to do this anymore. And I had that dream too. I was doing well. I was making a lot of money, and I can get into how I ran the business and why it was so profitable, but it was very profitable. So that wasn't my issue, but I honestly, looking back, not sure why, but I did have that same dream. Let me cash out and be set. I can tell you that now I regret that, and which is why I'm back in the business now. I sold my company in 2014. I stayed on for a year to help them. That was part of the deal. Then I retired for a very short amount of time. And then I came back to the company to help them some more for a number of years. Then I phased out. My non-compete's been over for a number of years now. Now I'm back in it. This is not a reflection of my deal or anything like that. Just on a personal level, if I could go back in time, I would not sell it.
Interesting.
Even though it was a huge success for me.
Right. Because you ended up circling back and needing to kind of wait out a non-compete. And then, now you're rebuilding again. Well, you would have rather just kept it that whole time, right? Right.
So, I mean, be careful what you wish for, So I'll tell you, it was tough for me when I was retired. I grew up with nothing. I'm a self-made man, like really struggled at first. And everything I have, I've worked really hard for. Everything I have also came to me in one form or another from real estate, whether it's investment properties, commissions, or whatever. Real estate is really, I don't know a better way to make a lot of money. So, I'm not complaining. But when you go from working really, really hard, 7 days a week, almost 365 days a year, and now you have enough money in the bank for the rest of your life, and nobody needs you, and no one's relying on you, and you have no purpose, and you have nothing to get up for in the morning, and you just it's kind of a weird place to be. And what I found interesting was not only was it unfulfilling, I got no mercy from anybody. I tried to explain to people how not fun it was, and people would be like, "Oh, cry me a river."
Everyone's like, "Pity you." Oh gosh, right? I retired early, and
right. But the truth is, I mean, my business was everything to me. It was my purpose. I mean, there was 250 agents. That means there were 250 families. So let's say at a minimum, 500 people or 700 people whose livelihood came from, and not to say from me, like I'm patting myself on the back, but from this thing that I created. So it was very rewarding and fulfilling, and it was really, my purpose. And you sell it and you get money. All of that gets reduced to just a bunch of zeros on your bank statement.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Makes sense, especially if what you're doing is in line with your ultimate purpose, and maybe you don't realize it then, but to have the time to reflect and be like, oh gosh, that was my purpose and I sold it.
Right. And then, just speaking financially, I got a very good deal and it all worked out. But there's two different kinds of money. There's money coming in, right? Income. And then there's money in the bank. And of course, when money's coming in, the goal is to put it in the bank and to amass money in the bank. But even if you do that and you have plenty of it in the bank, when there isn't money coming in, it doesn't feel so good. It doesn't matter how deep the well is. If you're going back to the well every day, even if the well's deep enough to last the rest of your life, it's still not the same as when the well is filling up every day.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can't relate, but they can understand that concept, right? When you're just bleeding the well dry every single day, it's different level of feeling towards everything, self-worth, motivation. You're just like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I need to go get up and do something.
Correct. It's very important to have something, to have responsibilities and purpose, and get up in the morning and say, okay, this is what I have to do today, and to make a difference, to move the needle, whatever that is. It's important.
Sure. So understood. So you regret the sale. However, I still know that a lot of my listeners are like, dude, I've been doing this too long. It's not my passion. I'm ready to freaking sell this thing and go on my yacht in the Bahamas, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to just dive into a little bit more of the systems. Like, how do you even build a valuable enough proposition to attract 250 agents to you in your market? I guess that's kind of the first thing, is like, how does that even happen?
Right. So, and then the next thing is, how do you build an enterprise that somebody's willing to pay you for? And I think that really it's one and the same, because if you have a value proposition that will make 250 agents come and want to work with you, then that will be why someone will pay you for that. Right.
Makes sense.
Right. So I'll go back to when I first got into business, and I sold some homes to my neighbors and friends and exhausted my sphere of influence, and still needed to make a living. And at that point, I had already tasted success, didn't want to go back to a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
So I leaned on my background from before real estate, which was software and marketing. I'm a self-taught programmer, and I'm a marketing guy from my time in corporate America. So I said, you know what? I need to reach the masses. So, and this was 2005, 2006. So my entire career have always been a big believer in the internet, changing everything that we know about life. Now, as we sit here today, that's already happened. It's done. But back then, real estate was probably the last industry that had not been transformed yet by the internet. Sure. So it was just obvious to me, if I want to reach customers, it would be online. So I put together a website. This was before or right when Zillow was just getting started. They were probably not known to most people in the business. So I started generating leads online. Really, simple concept. But back then it really wasn't being done.
That was the heyday.
Yeah. And I started generating more leads than I can handle. So all I did was I would capture some leads and sell them houses. So now I solved my problem. I didn't need to rely on my own personal connections. I was able to reach new people. And that was wonderful. And I was able to reach people at all different price points, even higher price points than my own personal sphere of influence at the time. So that worked well. But quickly, I had more customers than I could handle. So I started building a team. And the way I did that was I would take a lead off the internet. I would cultivate them, get them in the car, go sell them a house. And then I would turn around to the listing agent and then talk to them about where I got this customer, and how, if they work with me, I'll give them the next one. That my goal wasn't really for me to be superstar agent. My goal was to build business. And you coming from a place of credibility, when you take when you're talking to a listing agent who, I'm just thinking of real life examples from the early days, your listing agent had a multi-million-dollar house that's been on the market for 2 years. And then you come along with someone who you met 3 days ago and they buy the house. And they looked at me and they're like, who are you? Where'd you come from?
Right. Especially that day.
Right.
Yeah.
And you do that a couple of times with the same listing agent. And, I'm talking about, you go into a farm area where, there's established people, and you start selling their inventory for them. And then you have their attention. That's how I started recruiting. And I would take the best leads I had, and I'd give them to my agents. Always give the agents the better ones. After a couple of years, I stopped selling. And I think that's very important, to be a non-competing broker. If you're doing your own deals and then you have agents, the agents are always going to be an afterthought. You're not going to have the next superstar working under you, because whether it's true or not, the perception is always going to be that they're getting your leftovers.
Man, that is such an important concept to understand. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because all the brokers out there that keep saying, I want to escape the day-to-day of the business. I'm 80-90% of the production. I want to, move out of that. You're still taking the best leads from all your agents,
Well,
right?
okay, right,
and you're not teaching anyone to do your listings. You're only giving them buyer leads, and you're doing all the stuff, right? That is reinforcing you staying in the business.
Well, there's a lot of issues with that. First of all, if you're 80-90% of the production, then you don't really have a business. You're really self-employed. It's not the same thing because everyone knows that when they buy the company from you, you want to go off to the Bahamas on your yacht. So then off goes 80% of what we just bought.
Yep. That's actually, it's the inherent problem with selling a brokerage is that they remove the founder's production volume, which if it's zero, no worries. But if it's 80-90%, well, now your valuation is not what you want it to be.
Right. So I stopped working directly with clients probably in 2010 or 2010, I think. And I sold the business in 2014.
Just to like solidify what you said, you started in production, you proved yourself in the market, you recruited, and then you eliminated yourself from production, your online lead generation, and giving your team the best leads. So then you were 0% of production, technically, and then now you have something that's interesting to purchase.
Right. Now, a big part of what they purchased was the technology. And you know, so that's why the deal was I stayed on for a year to do a handoff of the technology. But when you buy a technology from a founder, you understand if there's a proper handoff, then the founder can fade away.
Yes.
Right. Whereas if the rainmaker, the salesman can't, he goes away, the sales go away.
You can't buy a sphere and have the same rapport and influence over that sphere. Right.
So there's that. But then there's so many other parts of this. Also, you know, when you buy a roster of agents and then the leader leaves, you know, maybe the agents all scatter. And that's another concern that people have when they buy brokerage. But when your company is providing your agents with 50% of their sales volume, they're not going anywhere, right? So my value proposition back then was that my goal, if you come work with me, is that I will double your business. So I might not pay you the same split that you're getting somewhere else. I might pay you 10 or 20% less, but if it's of twice as much volume, then we're all making money. You know, the whole idea of competing on splits is just a race to the bottom.
It is.
It's like any business. If you compete on price, then there's always someone willing to work for less than you.
Then you're a commodity and you race to the bottom.
Right.
Are you open to sharing your split when you were generating leads and providing deals for them?
Oh, yeah. Back then I was generating several hundred leads a day. And, you know, we didn't have 250 people overnight. It grew. But the goal was, you know, it ebbs and flows, but the goal was for any agent that's on the program that you'd give them an average of a lead or two a day. You know, maybe they get 5 one day and on the next day, but they're building a pipeline. And we created a entire system to cultivate those leads. So it wasn't just like, oh, here's someone and give it a shot, and then, you know, they fall off the back. We had a whole system. We learned a lot about what it takes to cultivate online leads, which is sometimes up to 2 years. So you need a system. Again, I leaned on my experience in working for a Fortune 100 company with marketing. I learned a very basic concept there, which is if you do advertising, your target audience needs to see your ad 5 times before they notice it. So this is, if you're running a TV ad, the same individual, before he picks up the phone to order something, he saw that ad 5 times before he even noticed the ad. So when you think of an ad on TV for whatever, you've seen it multiple times. The first 4 times, it just was lost on you. So when you understand that, then you understand if someone comes on your website and clicked on a property and they filled out a form, and then you call them and don't get them, you might put them in your CRM. It doesn't mean they're calling you next year to buy a house.
Right.
But if you can stay in front of them, get them to come back to the website, let them know every time there's new listings. I mean, this stuff is more commonplace today than it was back then, but I still don't know how many people really understand how it all, you know, the importance of why these things are done that way. Like, you're not sending out email alerts because you're trying to get lucky and put the right property in the inbox of the right person today. I mean, that happens ultimately, and then they call and then you make a sale. But really, it's about staying in front of them so that when they are ready to buy in a year from now, you're someone who they think of. Especially here in Florida, where we do a lot of business with people from out of state. So if someone's up in New York and they're Googling about places in Florida and they stumble into your website, then it doesn't mean that next year when they come down here that they're going to remember you, or they don't even know like how they that they did or how they got into your system. But if you stay in front of them for a year or sometimes two, then you'll be the one, hopefully, that they call when they're ready. So, I can go off a lot of different tangents here. There's a lot of competition now.
I do want to stop you there. You touched on a good point, and I'd love to just extrapolate a little bit more value for my listeners out of that. So you mentioned you had a website early. Mm-hmm. That's phenomenal. That's a conduit to have a lead form and capture leads. Mm-hmm. But now you need to drive traffic to it. And it's either organic or paid, right? You either have incredible search engine optimization, which was easier back then than it is today, but it's either organic or you're paying per clicks on Google, or now it's very common to do social media paid advertising, right? So back then, what were you doing for traffic?
So back then it was all natural, organic search engine optimization, which, by the way, is still the best.
Still so
traffic.
Powerful.
Still the best. Yes, it's harder to do it now. It's still by far the most valuable. And I can tell you why. Many reasons. I mean, the very basic idea is someone goes to Google and says, homes for sale in XYZ. You're not pushing out in front of people, hey, I have houses for sale. I have houses for sale. They're coming and saying, I'm looking for a house. They're asking a question. You're providing an answer. So they're looking. If someone sees an ad on TV, I don't know, you got to catch them on the right time. It's a shot in the dark. You got to put that ad in front of them right on the day or week that they're thinking about buying a house. And then they have to be right in this moment while they're sitting on their couch, ready to act on it and write down your number, which is probably not going to happen. But if someone's sitting at their computer typing into Google, looking for homes for sale in such and such place, and they come onto your website and see homes for sale in that place, they'll click on it.
They have intent.
Correct. Now, pay-per-click theoretically is the same, but in my experience, there's a lot of issues with pay-per-click. I'm sure Google does not want people to understand this because this is how they make their money. But the pay-per-click ads, first of all, they're too expensive. It's a bidding system. But the problem is that all of my competition doesn't understand marketing and doesn't understand how many clicks you need onto your site before somebody actually converts. And they don't understand after they convert, what percentage of those close. So then they go and they bid $5 or $10 a click. And you can't make money if you pay that per click. If that's the top of the funnel, then what comes out the other end, it's going to be a losing proposition. So people bid too much. It's too expensive. You can't make money that way.
Makes sense. So did you want to kind of like wrap up that thought?
Just social media, I think, is a similar issue. You could do Facebook ads, and we've done them. But it's also, they don't have intent. They're just scrolling and they see a picture of a fancy house. Of course, they're going to click on it. Doesn't mean that they're in the market for it or that they can afford it. And now in recent years, because of regulation, Facebook has changed their ad system where real estate ads are considered a special category, and you're no longer allowed to put filters like net worth or income or things like that, which is a whole nother conversation because I'm not so sure that violates anything just to target but that's a whole nother conversation. It's not redlining or steering. I mean, if you do it on certain things, it is, but to try to put your ad in front of a certain demographic of, say, people who could afford $1 million house, I don't know that that's illegal, but Facebook doesn't let you do that anymore because of regulation. So now it's really almost like TV advertising. You got to just pay to put it in front of millions and millions of people and hope that included in that big net is someone who's the right person.
Well, I can appreciate the sentiment, and your technological knowledge of the algorithm and how Facebook has evolved is definitely far more advanced than a lot of my guests. However, this is my bread and butter, my ballpark, and there are ways around it to work within the guidelines and to get past the housing. You don't get past it. You still have the housing special ad category on, but there are ways to still, for example, get audiences of high net worth individuals, or to, for example, have a type of picture of a nice house resonate with the right people through effective copywriting and longer forms on websites rather than just like name, phone, email, right? You do like a long form and there's definitely ways and strategies.
There certainly are. Yeah. And I would be interested to learn more about that. My focus this time around, now that I'm back in the business now about 6 months, and I'm focusing on organic search engine optimization again. And it certainly has evolved a lot since the last time I did it. Primarily, the Google algorithm used to look at your code more, and now they look more at like screen rendering. So you kind of have to shift your thinking and what you're doing, which is just different. But and it's obviously much more competitive now. The first page of Google is filled up with big portals, including my old company. So that's interesting. But I still believe it's worthwhile because the intent is still better on those. And when you get it right, I'm not going to say it's free because it costs a lot of money to be able to succeed at this. You really need to invest. But when you get it right, you're not paying per click or per customer, and you'll reap rewards for a long time to come.
May I ask, are you also remarketing to those that are signing up and visiting your website?
Yeah, so probably not as much as I should be right now, because you just have to, when you're running a business, one thing at a time. You have to choose, where you're going to hyper focus and move the needle, and then you can circle back around. And but yes, I do believe in that. Taking the email addresses that you've collected, and you have information about them, you know what they're interested in, and then doing that's one area where social media advertising is very cost effective, where you're only showing the ad to these people who you already know who they are. Where, for example, if you live in a neighborhood, this is just a farming idea. So I happen to be a big believer in postcard farming, but that's a whole other conversation. But the current, if people ask, well, how can you farm on the computer? How can we use the internet to farm it? You really can't buy lists of email addresses based on geography. Like based on a neighborhood. It doesn't really exist. And doing email marketing unsolicited to just, wide net stuff is all very problematic, and you're going to just mess up your email deliverability and you're going to have problems. So that's not really a solution. But if you say you're an agent and you live in a planned community, like a gated community, a country club, and that should be your first farm area, obviously, because you live there, you socialize there. And in many of those communities, you can get all of your neighbors' email addresses, or you can get the club directory. And I know that all of these neighborhoods, clubs, whatever they are, don't want you to mass mail them, and they'll probably get really upset if you do. And I'm not saying you should. You shouldn't do that if it's against the rules. But what you can do, that first of all, no one will know. Second of all, no one will mind, is you can take that list and you can put it into Facebook as a targeted audience. And all you're saying is that when this guy who I happen to know lives in this neighborhood, when he goes on social media, I'm going to show him a house for sale in his neighborhood. That works very well.
Yes, exactly. And I call that digital farming.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So I'll partner with a real estate professional and a title company, and then we'll say, okay, we want to farm this area. Cool. You're going to do a postcard campaign. Let's then mimic that postcard online, and we'll do custom audience polling and let Facebook match based on title information.
Right.
And maybe only get a 60 or 70% match, but that's still only showing it to those people in that area. So they see the postcard 3, 4, 5 times over the next couple months and
reinforce it. And then they go on the computer and they see the same thing.
Yeah, again, exactly 2 to 3 times a week as well for pennies, right?
Right. It's a good reinforcement. I still believe in postcards. People do all kinds of direct mail. Postcards to me are the only thing that work. I think it's primarily because you come home at the end of the day and you go through your mailbox and you have to decide, which 90% of this is garbage and which 10% do I need to actually open. And you're going to throw away the solicitations, but with a postcard, you have to see the message to decide whether you're keeping it or not.
I know. It's one of the genius parts about mail is people on one hand are like, yeah, they just throw it in the can. It's like, oh yeah, well they do. They throw it in the trash like every single time pretty much, but it's an impression.
But they saw your face. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think the best postcards are the 6x11. So they're long, so they stick out of your mail in the mailbox. They don't get, because if they're real short, they could literally get lost in the newspaper. So the long ones, but not the 8.5x11, because 8.5x11 gets folded. So the 6x11, it stays intact and you can't miss it.
That's funny. That's a great tip as well. So I'm curious, you've successfully exited real estate brokerage. Now you're getting back into it. You had success in the W-2 world, traveled the world, had success in product marketing. I'm curious, what is the single most important action you take on a daily basis that has attributed most to your success? This podcast is really about entrepreneurial success habits, distilling down the success of top real estate professionals. So when I ask that question, does anything come to mind, a specific action or habit?
So I don't know if this is specific enough, but I think that you have to know what your big picture goal is, but then you also have to know what tasks have to happen to reach that goal. And you have to wake up every day and say, what am I going to do today just to inch it along a little bit closer to where we need to go? Just keep pushing along. I think that the biggest mistake, and this is in any business in life, and people make effort and they probably give up, 80% of the way there because they're not seeing the results. And then you were on your way, but you never actually knew it because you didn't get to the goal. I think you have to just know what the goal is, wake up every day and say, what can I do today to just get me an inch closer to that? And if you do that consistently, day in, day out for a year, for 2 years, you'll get there because it's all relative to your competition, and most people will not stay the course. So if you do, you will. For me, I'm in Florida. Florida's kind of a funny place. It's changing. It's definitely evolving. I've been here 20 plus years. When I moved here, it was more of a vacation place, and the work ethic was more, laid back. And I was from New York, where I woke up at 4 a.m. to take a bus and 2 trains to get to Manhattan for 7 a.m. So, for me, building my business first time around, I was like, let me just keep my New York work ethic and I'll be so far ahead of my competition.
Makes sense. Yeah. Coming from that world in New York and then bringing that type of work ethic to Florida, you're already set up for success.
But a lot of people move from there to here and then they fall into the trap of being in vacation mode. One of the things I've always struggled with my agents was dress code. I come into the office in shorts and flip-flops, and no one in New York would go to work in flip-flops, but in Florida, it's Florida. I don't know what they think. I'm like, if you want to be on vacation mode, you'll be on vacation. If you want to make money, you be on vacation. And then I'd get things from them like, well, my clients were casual today. And I say, I understand that. Your clients are not at work. You are. Your clients are down here to play golf. And in between golf and the spa, they want to go look at a house. So they call you. But that doesn't mean you're playing golf or going to the spa today. So you don't,
it's true.
They don't expect you to look like them. For example, let's say you were getting divorced, right? And you went to see a divorce lawyer. Now you have to stop at your lawyer's office on the way back from the gym in the morning. So you come out of the gym in your sweats, looking like a mess, and you stop by your lawyer's office. That's fine. But if he was sitting behind his desk in his pajamas, I don't think you'd hire him.
That's right. It's like my commercial broker mentor, one of the things he said, which stuck out in a training class, he was asked about dress code and he said, well, show up in your shorts and flip-flops with, 5 o'clock shadow, and I'm going to show up in a fitted suit, clean shaven, and kill you.
Right. Exactly. You really can't overdress. If you overdress, people will, you could, not saying you should, but
no,
just take it to
I
an
agree.
extreme. You could show up in a tuxedo. People might be like, why is he wearing a tuxedo? But they're not going to think that you're a bum off the street. If you show up, in your gym clothes, they might not know that you're the agent. And that's just embarrassing.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So I love that saying. I heard it a long time ago. You can never overdress. And so whenever you're thinking about one or two things, just go with the higher of the two as far as like dressing up, because you can never overdress.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm curious where you think the industry is heading. Now that you've had a few years off, you've seen the landscape kind of shift, and now you're getting back into it. Where do you think the industry is heading in the next 5 or 10 years? And also, what are you doing to set yourself up for future success?
Right. So that's part of why I got back into it. There's a big consolidation going on without, getting into names of particular companies, but there's big companies buying up little companies left and right. And I think that will continue. I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing, but it is what it is. It's, that's the way the world goes. Everyone's trying to make money and every business is trying to grow. So one way to grow is to gobble up little people who have worked hard in the trenches to build their markets. So that's happening and it will continue to happen. I think agents, either they get recruited to the big companies or the company they worked for gets acquired by the big company and now they find themselves at the big company. Some people will fight it and look for a new boutique place to go to. But then that's hard because it's an evolution. People are with a small broker they have a relationship with. So it's not so easy to just do that over again. But I believe that there is a void now in small, local, strong brokers who are strong business people who can help their agents actually grow their business. I think that that's something that is going, I mean, it's just a casualty of all this acquisition. And it's part of why I'm getting back in, because I think that there's a need for it. And I think that the big companies do what they do, and a lot of big producers will take the check to go there, and that's fine. But for every one of those, there's someone who actually prefers it the way it was, and they don't have their old home anymore. So I will offer them a solution.
Yeah, makes sense. And it also makes sense how you're positioning yourself in order to be successful in that landscape. So I'm curious if there's any books that you read that really guided you in your career. Like, do you have 1 to 3 amazing book recommendations for my listeners?
So 20 plus years ago, when I was first getting started in my career, before I was even in this business, I made it a goal to read a book a week. And I started reading a couple books here and there. And along the way, somewhere I read in one of these books that you should engage in what's called mind feed, and just don't worry so much about what book you're reading or if it's good or if it's worth your time. Just read and just keep reading and keep going. And if you read a book and you get one idea from it that you can incorporate into your life, then it was worth it. If it took you 10 hours to read the book or whatever it took you, it was worth it. So I had this goal for myself, read a book a week, and just whatever I could get my hands on. I mean, the topics that I read was self-help, finance, real estate, and technology and biographies. And I would just consume as much as I could, trying to get one actionable idea from each one. And some I did, some I didn't. But if you read a book a week, after a year, you've got, if you don't have 52, you've got 20 good ideas that can help you.
Sure.
So I don't know, trying to think of particular books and names of books that I read. I'll tell you one author who was very influential for me early on was Tony Robbins.
Of course.
This was in the 90s. People didn't really know who he was unless you were up at 4 a.m. watching infomercials.
Was that like the Personal Power and
Personal Power? I listened to Personal Power in 1994.
Those are the Personal Power days, yeah. So yeah. I'm a big Tony Robbins guy. I went to Unleash the Power Within in 2016, changed my life. I've done, his 2 years of his business coaching where you have every 10 days you have a call with a Tony Robbins certified coach. I've been deep in it and gotten access to all of his old stuff, Get the Edge, Mastering Influence, and Personal Power, some of the old stuff. Yeah. So I'm more of a recent Tony Robbins guy, but that's great to hear that early 90s you're on it.
I'll tell you a funny story about Tony. So in the 90s, I bought Personal Power. So I was in the 90s, before I moved to Florida. I was living in New York, did not have money. I was in my 20s. I was trying to figure out how to get ahead. And I was up middle of the night watching TV, and I saw an infomercial for some audio program on how to buy real estate with no money down. I won't say the name of the program, whatever. I don't know if it's around anymore. And I bought it for a few $100s that I did not have at the time. And I got it, and I read the books and listened to the tapes, and it wasn't really something I could put into action. It was basically try to get people to sell you the house, but you're not going to pay them till later kind of thing. I was like, this is, and I felt like I spent money. It was irresponsible of me. I was really young and just starting out and didn't have extra money. So some time passes and I'm up again in the middle of the night watching infomercials, and I see this Personal Power. And I was tempted. You know how these infomercials go? They suck you in, especially when you're young and impressionable. And I wanted to buy it. And I said, I can't do this again. But I watched it. It was like an hour-long thing, and I watched it. At the end of the hour, I said to myself, this guy on TV, he has already given me $250 of value. So I'm going to buy it. So I did. And I listened to it, and it really changed my life. I listened to it then. And then a few years later, I forget why, I just needed some inspiration. And I said, I'm going to listen to it again. So this is now 1996. I'm listening to it for the second time. And I remember clear as day, I was sitting there and he was going through the exercise on how to set goals. And he says, write down the car you want. He says, but be specific. If you want a Mercedes, write down Mercedes S-Class black. Like, don't be, and I remember writing this down, and someone was with me at the time who laughed at me and said, this is ridiculous, and walked out of the room. And I remember what I wrote down. I wrote down blue BMW 7 Series. This was in 1996. So I listened to the program. It really helped me. I really think it changed my life. Many years go by. I moved to Florida. I work for this company, that kind, start my business, have a family, get divorced. All these things happen. And we're talking 20 years later. And all throughout this time, people would ask me, what celebrity would you want to meet? I'd say, I don't care if the president of the United States calls the office. I'm not taking the call. Just find out what he wants and give him to one of the salespeople. I don't care that he's famous.
Yeah.
But I always said the one person I like to meet was Tony, because I feel like he changed my life. So one day in 2013, so many, many, many years later, I am lying in bed 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, and my phone rings, and it's the office. And I know that the office is not open. So I know that if my phone is ringing from the office at 11 o'clock at night, it has to mean that somebody called the office, went through the directory, picked me, and chose the option to transfer to my cell phone. And I know from experience that the people who do that usually are not people who are very considerate if they go on at 11 o'clock at night and picking the broker from the directory and transfer to the cell phone. So I usually don't pick up, and I just screen the call and listen to the voicemail. So it pops up voicemail. I click play. And instantly I knew his voice. He's like, hi, this is Tony Robbins. I found you on Google and I'm moving to Florida. I want to know if you could help me buy a house.
Oh, that is amazing. Yeah. You instantly called him back?
I did. I think he said, text me first so I know to pick up. And I did. And we did sell him a house. I gave it to one of my agents. I was true to my word. So my agent got the commission. The house got its cut. That's fine. But my agent handled it. Tony asked to meet me because he would call me all the time when he would go with other brokers, and it's fine. The consumer doesn't understand our business, and they're just looking for a house. They're not looking for a realtor. And he was looking at different parts of the state, and he would call me and we would talk. And at some point he wanted to meet me. So I went out. First time I was out on showings in years, but I went with my agent who was helping him, and I met him. And that was one of the days I'll always remember.
Wow. What a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. And you did it in the blue BMW 7 Series.
Oh, yeah, that was, that was why I told you that. I remember clear as day going on that appointment. And I'm like, 15 years ago, whatever it was at that time, I made this goal, and here I am, and I'm meeting him, and look at the car I'm driving. So you know what? The goal setting works.
Boom. That's an even more powerful story now. I love it.
Right.
Awesome. Well, hey, was there a question that I should have asked or anything that you'd like to expand upon from earlier?
No, it's your show. Whatever. I can't believe how much time we've covered.
I know. 45 minutes flies by, huh?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, awesome. Well, how can listeners contact you?
You can call my office at 561-235-2161 or on the web, www.zfc.com.
Amazing. Zev Freidus, everyone, in Boca-Raton, Florida. Definitely have to look him up if you're interested in, one, joining his team, because I think he's growing again and recruiting, right? Okay.
Yes.
And then two, if you want to refer any business to him, or if you're a consumer that's interested in that area, definitely look him up, check him out. He's obviously been in that market for a long time, had tremendous success in that market, and really excited to see what you do with this next venture, because, hey, you're back, you're better than ever. So
awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Really appreciate having you on.
Thank you for listening. If you want to accomplish your real estate goals, then I highly suggest downloading my free Ultimate Real Estate Goal Setting Framework. The link is in the description of the show, and it will help you break down your annual income goal into the amount of phone calls, appointments, or open houses you need in order to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.